Welcome to Colorado State University's podcast, The Audit, where host Stacy Nick talks with CSU faculty about topics ranging from their latest research to current events.
As of late April 2026, Colorado is experiencing its worst snowpack on record, with nearly 98% of the state experiencing drought conditions. The historically low snowpack is raising alarm over heightened wildfire risks and dwindling water supplies as we head into the summer season. With water restrictions already being announced in cities like Denver and Aurora, homeowners are left wondering how to care for their lawns, landscapes, and gardens without breaking the bank or the rules. Researchers with CSU's Department of Horticulture and Landscape Architecture say this is the time to start rethinking one of the cornerstones of the American home, the lawn. Today I'm joined by Associate Professor of Landscape Architecture, Lori Catalano, and Assistant Professor of Landscape Design and Contracting, Scott Curry. We'll explore how lawns became the stereotypical symbol of curb appeal, the key differences between xeriscaping and xeroscaping, and rethinking what a sustainable landscape looks like in Colorado's changing climate. No home is considered complete without a lush green lawn in the front yard. Lori, let's start with you. When did that become the standard, and why do lawns play such a significant role in U.S. culture?
Well, there's a long history to the lawn. If we look back to the settlers moving from East Coast to West Coast, they bring the lawn with them. So they bring not only cultural values, animals, plants, and birds, but they bring this image of the lawn with them. But if you read the research on this, really pre-Civil War, there's not really lawns in the U.S. It's not until the 19th and 20th centuries that lawn become more common. I think the most well-known landscape architect to be involved in this, there are actually two, Andrew Jackson Downing, but Frederick Law Olmsted, we know him because he's the lead designer of Central Park. And so this idea of the lawn as a park, a communal landscape, gets embedded into the American psyche in a very healthy way. Parks are great for us. And then as suburbs start to develop, lawns are usually associated with more wealthy properties. And then after World War II, I'm skipping a lot of history, but after World War II, when real estate development and suburban development is really taking off, that's when the lawn becomes the norm for many people. And the lawn is used to make communities cohesive. So they no longer have fences between their houses. It is really a way of tying all those homes together in a community. And it is very much then part of our psyche. And then when we start to build suburban developments in Colorado, we use those same tools.
And it seems like in the last few decades, we've really gotten even more that idea of the stereotypical, HOAs have gotten involved, and you have to have a certain amount of grass, and you have to have this and that, and if it gets over this long, you get fined, and it's gotten very regimented.
Yeah, very policy-driven. And HOAs are known for that. I think it's because eventually this lawn gets associated with property values. So if your neighbor's house looks unpainted or full of bindweed, then you view it as changing the value of your property.
How has, or maybe the better question should be, how should the current drought impact the way people think about lawns and water usage?
I'll take that one. So, we are dealing with a really big issue if you go all the way to the Colorado River. We're starting to see that Lake Mead is not going to have enough water in it to generate hydroelectric power. That's a really big issue. A lot of farmers are not going to have enough allocated in order to grow crops this year. And that's going to cause big ripple effects. And outside of just expensive water bills, that's the cost of food. That's the cost of energy. There are ripple effects within that basin that people are going to feel. And I just heard from an ag economist actually recently, it's not that big of a deal when people can't water their lawn, but when you start to not be able to flush your toilet or buy food at the grocery store, people start to raise an eyebrow at that. Those are the things that we're starting to face here. The issue goes far beyond just the front yard, if you will.
And it feels like maybe that's an area that's probably easiest to go at from a water conservation perspective, maybe?
Well, I think it's easy to target because we all see it, whether it's policymakers or whatever, to say the individual should change this and stop doing this. And I think that actually most people want to contribute in their own way. And the way that many people feel as though they can make a difference is to rethink their lawn. That's why it always becomes the top of conversation. It's visual, it's green, we see it, and it's like, oh, that's the bad thing. And it's really not necessarily a bad thing, but it becomes the easiest target. If during a drought somebody is running their irrigation system on days they're not supposed to, it's very visible to your neighbor, and then your neighbor can turn you in. The larger issue is the value that lawn brings to our communities in terms of soccer fields and parks. And then when we have shade trees, it actually cools our city. So there are a lot of other values that the lawn can bring, but it also is identified easily as a target. So I think it's a much more nuanced question about landscape in general and landscape in the big picture.
110% agree with Lori. There are things about lawns that are immensely valuable, like urban wildfire interface, cooling effect, recreational value. Like, we definitely can't discount some of those things. It just has that one core negative, which is that really, really consumptive water use. So yeah, it opens up a really big conversation just about landscape composition when we look at specific sites or what we should put where. That whole idea of right plant, right place has never been more important, and thinking about that not just like on site scale, but on a statewide scale. What should we do? And that's a big question.
You mentioned that idea of that cooling effect. And I think that's interesting because I think a lot of people talk about xeriscaping and they talk about it as xeriscaping versus xeriscaping. So let's have you talk a little bit about that and what the difference is.
So xeriscaping, people have this idea in their head that they're just going to back up a dump truck full of rock and they're just going to rock that space and call it good. Zero. There's nothing there. Xeriscape plants are really the biggest key to making that super effective, because if we don't have that plant material, urban heat island effect takes over very, very quickly. That can make the problem worse. Phoenix is a great example of, they have so much hard surface and so much rock and decomposed granite that they are actually heating their environment. It causes a real problem. Denver Water is kind of credited with coining the term xeriscape in the 80s. And actually this year, they have changed that term to Coloradoscape. It's a clever rebranding so people have that pride in their state and they really understand that this can be a lush, productive landscape that supports a lot of different things. It's not just about water conservation. There are all these other factors that come into it.
That's a great idea too, because one of the things is we try to, this eastern landscape from a humid climate didn't work for us. So now we look to Phoenix and we look to Las Vegas, and they have half the precipitation we have, and they have different soils. And so having it be specific to our region and our climate, we have a lot more possibilities available to us. Our native grasses, our perennials are beautiful, and even adapted species that are low water, all of those can be incorporated into creating really beautiful 4-season landscapes. So this idea of just putting down rock mulch is what we're probably the most worried about, the xeriscaping.
That is exactly what we're not looking for, just because of the social value and the economic value. I mean, you're lowering the value of your neighborhood and hurting the environment by doing it. You might save water, but the negatives far outweigh the positive. We don't want a solution that creates another problem. That's definitely why good design and good plant selection, all the things that we're talking about today, are going to be more and more important.
Scott, you recently noted, and this is the op-ed that you did recently, that outdoor irrigation in Colorado only represents about 2.8% of all water used. And that sounds like, forgive the pun, a drop in the bucket compared to other uses such as agriculture, which we talked about earlier. Why is it important that we focus on this area in regard to water conservation?
So it's going to make some local resilience for people. Like if we don't do something on conservation, like kind of on the home front, it is going to escalate the price in other areas. And it is a very complex issue when we look at some of those larger uses as far as industrial and agricultural and things like that. And we're going to have to let Congress and a lot of judges and lawyers figure out some of those things. What we at least have here is we do have this actionable item that's going to put more water back in some reservoirs, hopefully keep water bills at least stable within reason, and just getting our environment more resilient at the end of the day. If you have a landscape that's actually implemented that can survive in a year where we do have record low precipitation, that's great. That means that those water bills aren't going to affect you as much. It doesn't matter what year it is in any of that natural precipitation. That's just gravy, and it's going to make your garden look even better.
As you mentioned, this is something, once you do it, the dividends continue to pay off. That drop in the bucket keeps dropping, it's going to add up.
Yeah, this is what I like to call, especially for front yard landscape, it's like that aggregated effect. The more people that do this, the more water that we can actually conserve. These postage stamps, 1,000 square feet of turf, it's really not that much water just in one spot. But if you have tens of thousands of people start to adopt it, it adds up very quickly. That's why adoption is going to be pretty important for some of these Colorado scapes going forward.
Lori, now you've spoken about the need to embrace the beige when it comes to our yards. And for some, that probably paints a very boring mental picture for them. But you've said it doesn't have to. What does embracing the beige really mean?
I said that in a way that was hoping people to begin to look at our landscape in a much more nuanced way. The other important thing about it is seeing the landscape through 4 seasons. Think of the landscape not just when you're putting water on it and then it goes away, but starting to see the seed heads that are left on our grasses or some beautiful stems that are left over and not cutting them down in the fall, adding that subtlety. Our landscape in Colorado in the summertime can be pretty lush. It's not really beige. It's only in the wintertime that people see our landscape as, while it's dormant, many people think it's dead. Or they look at the prairies and they find them boring instead of seeing the subtleties in the colors. So there's actually a lot more subtlety in the beige and the tan and the red, and even some stems are kind of blue. I think it really is referring more to a year-round landscape. So we're designing these new Colorado scapes to actually have interest year-round, and that we as residents actually begin to see and value and appreciate that. We can begin to create palettes that are much more visually interesting and also provide more diversity. So the one thing about the lawn is that while there are different species in it, it tends to be somewhat a monoculture. And the tendency is to want to replace that social norm with another simple norm, just a new grass, right? Let's find a new species of grass, Bermuda grass, buffalo grass, that does the same thing, so we don't really have to think in more depth about it. We just replace that lawn with another green plant. We're proponents of looking more deeply at that because that's really not a possibility at this point to just substitute one plant for another. So thinking about the combinations of plants that we put together and then how one could have a flower in the springtime and another in the summertime, actually take on a purplish leaf color or bloom in the summer, and in the fall they have seed heads that are left up all winter. So that 4 seasonality will begin to bring more interest into our environment, and it's not just replacing a lawn.
As the climate changes, our plant material is also going to change. So just a lot of nuance about just how those green, brown, tan, blue, purple, it is colorful Colorado at the end of the day. And just having even that drought dynamic, or how does it look when we do get that wetter year? It's kind of one of those amazing things about our climate is it does have that dynamic look to it. And I think we've trained ourselves to not want that. That's the thing that's really the kicker here is we want consistency in our lives, and that's one thing that a lawn offers. It's gonna look very consistent year round. It needs the same kind of inputs, and it just doesn't quite invite that surprise of the landscape in. But that's the thing that we really, really want. That shows that you have something that's going to be ecologically functional at the end of the day. It is dynamic.
You mentioned that idea that we like consistency. How do we break that way of thinking so people will try and do something different? Is it education? Is it water restrictions? Is it carrot or stick?
I think you have to use a little bit of both. One of the things that I like to lead with is just as many beautiful examples as we can have. And I think that's a little bit more of a carrot. You are going to get some property value out of having one of these xeriscapes. One of the more desired things that people are actually looking for in their home now is an efficient home. So efficient fixtures inside an efficient landscape. Again, going back to resilience, that's a great thing right there. So good examples. I think water restrictions are going to be a tool. And one thing that they don't tell you is your water provider still needs to sell water in order to keep their head above water. That's one of the things that water restrictions are there for. With the reduction of the sale of water, they have to make sure that they can still operate their infrastructure and do the things that they need to do. It's a tool that's important. It has kind of that dual facet because you're going to get people to conserve water because you don't want to spend your entire paycheck on your water bill. And it's going to get people to think about some of these ideas about conserving water, even just take one day a week off your sprinkler controller. Maybe I won't haul the hose out this time of year. There's definitely a lot of tools in the toolkit. Education, too. I mean, we're in the business of education here. It's super important. I think that's probably the most important for your homeowner. You want to see that this is effective and you want to see that there's a return on investment. But going forward, the more educated that we are as a population living in this part of the world, that's when we're going to get that embrace. There's a lot more to it there than conserve water. Flip-flop one thing out. They're making me do this. We don't want people to feel like that. We're making you do anything. There are other options and things. And it's actually your chance for a little bit of self-expression. If you want to do something different than the other person, that's awesome. That's one of the cool things about the landscape and the personal garden.
And I do think there are going to be some sticks. And maybe some sticks that are out there need to be removed. Some HOAs still require that you maintain a front lawn without weeds and you mow it every so often. That stick needs to go away. And they're beginning to implement different water restrictions and things like that. A lot of that is about soil amendments to retain soil moisture that are very straightforward and simple to do if people are aware of them. The water boards are trying to do a very good job of communicating that. CSU Extension. There are resources out there available to help people as they have questions. So people shouldn't feel as though they are taking this on themselves and they're the only ones. But I do think that communities need to lead with better examples of landscapes that would be more resilient and more appropriate for this environment.
Under this idea of Coloradoscape, we're trying to unify the resources as much as possible because I think it's been a little hard for homeowners when you have the city of Colorado Springs saying one thing and you got the town of Castle Rock saying another thing, Aurora, Denver, all these things. Unification of the voice of what we're trying to do here so there's one-stop shop and not all these different voices chirping for slightly different things. I think that's going to create a lot of clarity for people and it's going to be a lot easier to implement. We want to avoid that barrier of analysis paralysis and just get people to act.
I don't want to have too many voices chirping, but I do want to get some of your top tips for if someone is thinking about Coloradoscaping. What are 3 things that they could do with minimal effort to start working towards that now?
Make a plan. It's always surprising. There's a lot of sticker shock associated with the cost of changing the system. Having a master plan idea so you can do it yourself, you can pick pieces to do, and you can plan that out. That's the key. There are resources to help you with that. CSU has the extension service and College of Agriculture, Horticulture and Landscape Architecture has a lot of information about that. Also, when you're going through that process, look closely at soil amendments. Going around and taking pictures of landscapes that are resilient, that you like, can be extremely helpful in helping you develop a visual picture of what it is that you're trying to accomplish.
One thing I would say is just simply watch your space. See what happens within a day. Just look out your window. Start to figure out where the sun is, where the shade is. I think that's one of the core things that people need to figure out first on the horticulture side. What kind of plants can go where? I think that can be a little shocking for people. Like, it's like, I put the hydrangea in full sun and it died in a month. Why did that happen? It's like, well, that's maybe not the right plant for that spot. So once again, embracing right plant, right place. Don't forget about irrigation. I think it's easy to abandon underground sprinklers really easily, but just making sure that you can get enough information about drip irrigation as well. These plants are going to need water, especially for the first, depending on what you plan out there, 1 to 5 years. So making sure that they're watered on a timely basis, something that you can control really easily and is going to be efficient, is going to be another really good thing. And then the other thing is familiarize yourself with a couple of materials. We don't want to just rock everything. Rock is no good. There's actually kind of a real art to make rock look really good. Don't be afraid in certain areas if you want some really lush pieces. Sometimes bare soil is one of those things. It's kind of scary for people. Mulch is great. Like wood mulch can be great. But if you have really, really dense plantings, it might not be the best. Like bare soil, if we're talking about supporting pollinators and insects and earthworms and all those different things, that can definitely have some value. So just learn about all those ground materials with it.
Maybe water less and see how much water their landscape really needs. If you're doing 4 days of watering, go to 3. See if your landscape does fine. Maybe you could go to 2. You may be able to cut your water in half by just looking at how much water you put on and then see how little your landscape can survive on. It's patience. I think that's the hard thing about landscape.
It's probably one of the other reasons people love grass. Instant greenification. These gardens, if you love them and nurture them, they're just so much more beautiful and diverse.
We've got our tips now. Where else can people go if they've got questions?
Municipalities have great lists wherever you live. I would encourage you to look at your local municipality. Check out CSU Extension Coloradoscape. There's actually a new program that got released as a partnership between CSU Extension and the Associated Landscape Contractors of Colorado. It's a little bit more geared towards contractors, but you can learn a lot about the entire process with that if you are very interested. Plant Select is a great place when we talk about those adapted species and getting those there. They come from the 7 great steps of the world, and those are guaranteed, vetted, and researched to be good plants for your landscape. In our Hort 432 class, one thing that has been around for a while is if you're really interested in doing some conversion on a residential scale, you can work with a student for a nominal fee, and we'll help you get set up with a design if you don't want to go the professional route. The students are ready to tell you a lot of the same information that we've told you today, and they're eager to get some experience designing and implementing some of these things.
Well, thank you both so much for your time. I appreciate it.
It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you, Stacy. It's been it's a fun conversation to have, a big conversation, and just something that we should talk about more.
That was CSU researchers Scott Curry and Lori Catalano speaking about how Coloradans can embrace the beige in the face of an impending drought. I'm your host, Stacy Nick, and you're listening to CSU's The Audit.